Do you like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Summoner's Wars? Well, if you like games that are that deck-to-deck kind of combat, I have the perfect game for you, because today, on Joker Reviews, we're going to be reviewing, fresh off of Kickstarter, Sanctuary, the Keeper's Era. Sanctuary, the Keeper's Era, is a game that looks a lot more complicated than it is, but when you really dig down on it at a mechanical level, it's a fairly simple game. Your game table will be set up like this, where you will have your Sanctuary cards back here. Your opponent will have theirs across, 4 in a row like that. You'll have your champion card off to the side, and you will have 4 cards across like this, 4 columns, divided into 4 rows. So a 4x4 grid where you can place your cards. You'll then have your deck here, your discard pile here, and the same goes mirrored on your opponent's side of the table. Put off your tokens, any tokens or crystals that you're going to be using, off to the side here, and you are ready to play. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into what the point of the game is. The point of the game is you are going to be summoning your cards into either of the rows here. You have your attacking row, you can see denoted by here, 4 across, or your defending row, which is here, 4 across. And your defending cards are doing exactly that. They're going to be defending your sanctuary. Your attacking cards are going to be trying to complete the object of the game, which is attacking your opponent's sanctuary and destroying them. Let's discuss the different types of cards you're going to come across in Sanctuary. So I'm going to grab here, and there are 4 different types of cards. There are Acolyte cards, which you can see here. There are Ritual cards, which are ones that are played and then their effect is immediate. And there are Sanctuary cards, which are these here. Those are your most important ones. And then there are Champion cards, which stay in the champion spot until you summon them to the board. And if they die on the board, then they are returned to the champion spot, face down, and they are dead. The primary cards that you're going to be summoning in the game are Acolytes. They're the ones you're going to have the most of. So let's break down what this kind of card looks like. In the top corner, you have your summoning cost, and you'll pay that using your gems that you have here. You're going to get 2 of those per turn, and once you pay them, they go back into the bank. So you can, for something like this, you wouldn't be able to summon it on 1 turn because it requires 3. So you might have to only use 1 of your gems and then be able to use it on the next turn, 1 of your crystals. This shows the faction that it belongs to. This shows its attack power. This shows how many hits it can take before it dies, so how much damage it can take before it dies. This is going to be any of the normal attributes that it has down here. So this one specifically is called Genesis, which allows it to use its ability as soon as it comes out in the field. So it's something that's going to be, as soon as you play it, it's going to use that ability. And then that ability, the special ability down here, is going to be the one that it uses. So when you play this card, you're going to pay your crystals, and you're going to place it down into any of the available spots, and it comes out exhausted, which means it's to the side. Exhausted means that it cannot block, it cannot attack on that turn, and doesn't get in the way of it using its ability, though, so it's still able to use its ability on this. So in this case, it says gain 1 crystal for each enemy exhausted unit on the battlefield. So say you played this out and for some reason this card was exhausted, you would get 1 of these crystals. It would go to you right there. Now let's go over ritual cards. Ritual cards are a little bit different, but they still have the cost up top, the title, what type of card they are, and the faction. Down here you're going to have its special effect. So this one, deal X damage to a unit where X is equal to the number of exhausted units on the battlefield. So this says exhausted units, not exhausted enemy units like the other one did. So that would count your units as well. So you would play this down, doesn't cost you any crystals to play it. You would then count the number of exhausted units, so 1, 2. So it can do 2 damage to a unit because there's 2 exhausted units on the board. So in this case, you would be able to use that and do 2 damage to that unit over there if you wanted to kill it, because it only can take 2 damage before it dies. So that would take it off the board in that scenario. Now let's talk about Sanctuary cards. Sanctuary cards are a little different. They have their title at the top, they have the type of card, they then have a special ability at the bottom. They then have two tracks, your Aegis track and your Decay track. Your Decay track is going to decrease using these markers after every turn that you take. Once it reaches the bottom, you will then gain the benefit of the special ability for the rest of the game. Your Aegis track will go down as it takes damage, and once you hit the bottom, then your Sanctuary is destroyed and it is removed from the board into the box and removed from the game. You have then lost that Sanctuary. The benefit is then gone if you had unlocked it by the time it was destroyed. The last type of card we're going to discuss is your champion card. Your champion card hangs off to the side here in the champion spot, and it is summoned by paying the same kind of cost. So this cost is still denoted up here. Gives you your name. It gives your kind of role. It gives the type of card, faction, health, damage, your attributes here, and your special ability. The big difference with this one is it can be summoned to the board. When it's summoned to the board, if it gets killed, it goes back to its spot here and flips over. So you can see there's also a different ability on the back. Once it has been killed and put back up into its spot here, it then just stays in that spot. You can never resummon it once it has been brought back. I'm going to go over some of the attributes that cards can have. You'll typically find this on your champion and acolyte cards, but they're the little symbols below the picture. So you have zealous, which means it doesn't come out exhausted. You're able to kind of use it that turn. You have fierce, which is the red one, which means, so like this one here, means it can only be deployed into attack position. The veil, also on this card here, means it cannot be the target of card effects or rituals. So abilities or rituals. So if you were to try and use like a sanctuary ability or a ability that's on one of your acolytes, you would not be able to target that card with it. It would have to get taken out by just killing it. The Reaper effect, which we have on this card right here, that means that if it does any damage to another unit, that unit is automatically destroyed. So you can have a weaker unit that has a Reaper effect and it would still be able to kill the card that it was attacking. So like if a card was defending against it and it wouldn't normally do enough damage to kill it, it would still be able to take it out because of that card effect. We have this symbol here, which is like this yin-yang kind of looking symbol. So we don't have it on any of these cards. Oh, we do. Here on this one. This one has the yin-yang symbol. That means it's an ongoing effect, so it's something that'll happen probably every turn. Genesis, we went over originally. This one right here. That means that effect takes place as soon as it's played. And last word. This is resolved the moment the unit is destroyed. So something like this. This card effect, exhaust a unit, would take place not only when it is first played because of the Genesis, but also when it dies. So that can be pretty useful there. And that's your basic attributes. Throughout the game, each players are going to be taking turns, and each turn is subdivided into 4 different phases. You're going to start with your beginning of turn phase, your summoning phase, then your attack phase, and then your end of turn phase. And I'm going to break down each one of those phases individually. Your beginning of turn phase is pretty simple. All you do is you gain your 2 essence crystals, which are these right here. Outside of turn 1, the first player only gets 1, but every other subsequent turn you're going to get 2 essence crystals. You're going to hang on to that and use them for summoning. And then you're going to resolve any at the beginning of your turn abilities or effects that any of your cards have. The next phase is going to be your summoning phase, and you are going to look at the cards in your hand, which is typically going to be a hand of 4, and you are going to summon cards from it, whether they be rituals or they be acolytes or summoning your champion. You just have to pay their cost and place them out onto the board. So say we wanted to summon this one here, we can summon it here. It comes out exhausted. We pay a crystal, goes back into the pile there, and then we could theoretically play this one if we wanted to. So this one is able to come out, and it has a Genesis effect, and it's 0 cost. We don't have to pay a crystal here. And gain 2 if at least one enemy unit is exhausted. So you can see we have one exhausted in this situation. So that would actually gain us 2 crystals back, which is nice. Start piling up those crystals. This ritual also costs nothing. So we would be able to do that if we wanted to. Now we've played it out, we have 3 exhausted units here. Normally this one, unless it was played this turn, probably wouldn't be exhausted unless it was from a card effect, but we'll leave it like that. So we play this one out. This is just like the example that we were showing before when I was talking about ritual cards. You play it down, you pay the cost, which is 0 in this scenario, and you'd be able to do damage. So here we can do 4 damage because there's 4 exhausted units. We'd actually be able to take out this big guy if we wanted to. So let's do that. And then this would go into our discard pile. And since this one costs 1, we have enough to play this. So we can play this down. Let's just put it down into defense position. We pay our 1 crystal. That goes back over there. And that is the summoning phase. The next phase of a player's turn is going to be the attack phase. You're going to resolve any abilities or card effects that have to do with the attack phase, and then you are going to attack. So, you can only attack with cards that are not exhausted. Let's look at this one, for example, though. This one was not exhausted in our current scenario. So, if you were to attack with this, you check to see if there's any cards that are blocking in the defense row, and there aren't in this case. So, this one would be able to attack directly, and they would be able to do it for 3 damage. So, you would have your little marker that would mark that one's on 3 damage. You can't really see it up there very well, but it would go on there, and you would indicate what health it is on. So in a scenario, if this one lost 3, it would go down to there because that would be the one that it's on. So you use that to denote it. In the case that, say this card was here, and it tried to attack the Sanctuary, the Sanctuary cannot be attacked in this scenario because there's a blocking card. So in this scenario, the blocking card, which is also not exhausted right now, would do damage to this card simultaneously as it does damage to it. So this card would be killed, but it will have done its job and defended the Sanctuary. This card would normally take damage, but this one does no damage. So for each unit on its flanks. And also it would get a bonus if it had units on its flanks, but this one doesn't. Flanks refer to the cards next to it, to the side. So if this one was here, it would refer to this spot and this spot. So this does 0 damage. So it can't kill this card, but it did do its job in defending the Sanctuary for that turn. So that is the attack phase. The last phase of a player's turn is the end of turn phase. You perform these following actions in the order that they're described, and it's actually important that you do them in that order because some card interactions will matter based on what order you do them in. So you're going to reset any of the damage that has been done to units. They have to be defeated in 1 turn. So if this took 1 damage, but it needs 2 to kill it, the 1 damage would be removed and it would be back to full health. You then rotate all of your cards to being active. So in this scenario right here, all of these cards would be active, and this one would have been exhausted when it attacked earlier, so now it would be rotated back to be active. All of your Sanctuaries are now going to move down their decay track 1. So if it was on 3, now it's going to go down to 2, and it'll progress down all the way to 0 eventually, but let's just say it's on 2 right now. The reason why the turn order matters is in scenarios like this, because you move this down first before you do end of turn effects. Once this hits the decay bottom here, you'll still be able to use your card effects here because it happens first. The next thing that you would do is resolve all those at the end of your turn abilities and effects on the cards in any order. You don't have to do them in a specific order. You then would choose and discard any number of cards, because if you want to replenish your hand with other cards, you can only drop to your maximum hand size, and then you draw cards from your deck until you reach your hand size. Before we move on to win conditions, I did want to touch on, during the attack phase, if you're attacking with your cards, you have to attack from left to right. You cannot pick and choose which ones go when. So there's always a set order left to right when you're attacking. In the scenario that we were doing before, where this card was here and everybody else was exhausted, there was no other card that we could have attacked with, so this one would automatically be the one that attacks because it was our only option in that scenario. But typically, if both of these were in active position, you would have to attack with this one before you attacked with that one. The whole point of everything that we've just explained there is to try and destroy your opponent's sanctuaries, and once the last one falls, you are declared the winner. So I want to go over some of the Kickstarter exclusive stuff, the most important of which is the Kickstarter box here, which has this great flap. It's got some nice artwork on it that folds over the top. It has an extra shelf on the side that can hold extra expansions, things like that. And it comes with 2 of these playmats, which are great. I love when games have playmats. Just it makes it so neat and easy to use on your table. It came with a whole bunch of cards that can play in different modes. So, like you can see extra rituals, extra acolytes. There's also like node cards. There's avatar cards, which is a type of card that isn't even there in the base game. Aura cards. There's a whole bunch of new cool stuff, artifacts that you can use in different game modes or just in your basic game there. It also came with this sheet, which has different game modes you can play in. So a lot of different ways you can play, which adds a lot of replayability to the game. And it came with improved versions of these different markers, crystals, and stuff like that would not have been with the base game. These are used for solo play over here, the vast majority of those. And that's pretty much what came with it with the Kickstarter edition. I definitely think it's a lot of extra content that was added to it, which is really cool. Now that you know how to play Sanctuary, the Keeper's Era, I'm going to meet you back up top and give you my final thoughts on the game. So in terms of my review of this game, I like the mechanics behind it. It definitely gives me shades of Summoner Wars, and outside of the movement, like Summoner Wars, you can move around on the mat. In this, there are certain cards that allow you to move around within your space, but there's not that kind of like, I'm a card that's invading enemy territory kind of thing that Summoner Wars has. But it still has that feeling because there are specific decks that go up against and they kind of focus on a specific thing. There's also shades of like a Magic the Gathering in this, where it sort of seems like that like exhaustion mechanic almost seems like tapping, and the something where you're playing the cards down, they can't act right away, there's like blocking and things like that. That definitely gives me shades of Magic the Gathering. There's also some shades of Yu-Gi-Oh in here. Every time I play a card, I'm like, I'm playing this card in attack position or defense position. It makes me think of playing Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day. But I think there are some decent interactions between the cards, and I think that's pretty cool. This is a fresh off Kickstarter game, so we haven't had a chance to kind of play all the combinations of the different decks, but the focuses that the decks have seem to be interesting, and they work well with each other. They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses, and that's kind of cool. Some of them are a little bit harder to play than others, I will definitely say that, but that's just like any kind of deck building or set deck kind of game, because there were ones in Summoner Wars that it's like, oh, this could be a really cool mechanic if I could figure out how to play it, because it requires a lot of setup sometimes, or there's certain cards that have to come out, and that kind of can curtail what you're really trying to do. There are some drawbacks. The Kickstarter exclusive Decay and Aegis tokens that they give you, they're like little wooden tokens. They're too big for the cards. I don't understand why they made them so big. So they cover up like multiple numbers when you have them on the card, which is kind of weird. They can make them smaller, or they can make them, I don't know, different shape or something. I'm not sure exactly why they did it the way that they did. I like that they're like solid pieces. I can understand, but it makes it hard to track and hard to see what your opponent has. The rule book is horrendous. The rule book is this tiny little rule book, and it's like you have to open it up, and as soon as you open it up, it's literally like this big, and as soon as you open it up, it like bends, and you can never get it back to how it was. The text is really small. The examples are really small. I understand they were maybe going for an aesthetic choice because, oh, it's this little rule book, it fits in with your cards, and I can kind of understand that, but it's unreasonably small and fiddly. Like I can see it getting lost or destroyed, or a lot of different things happening to it. It's already like just from opening it up and reviewing the rules and stuff, it's already like really bent and kind of messed up. The rules themselves, I don't know if it's a translation issue or what it is, but some of the rules don't make sense. You can kind of understand what they're going for when you get it from context, and like we've played a lot of games here at the channel and outside of the channel, and so we can kind of understand what some of the rules are going for, but some of them are actually contradictory, where one page will say something and then another page will say something different, or one page will say something in terms of the abilities of the sanctuaries. When a sanctuary gets destroyed, it gets removed from the game, but that they don't address what happens to the ability until later on in the rule book. They mention that it gets removed from the box and it stops what the ability that the sanctuary was having every turn. It's also weird that the sanctuary cards have two sides to them, and both of them have the ability on it, which would seem to imply that you can destroy the sanctuary, flip it over, and then it stays active. Kind of like what happens with your champion, which gets flipped over and stays in the champion spot, but the ability keeps happening. It looks basically the same, so I don't understand why one gets removed from play and the other one stays, and why it would have the other side if that's going to be the case, because the other side's exactly the same with the ability without the trackers. Not really sure. There's a symbol on the cards that the assumption is it represents just attack or some kind of damage, and it's not referenced anywhere in the rule book, at least that I can find. It's this like little drippy kind of iron symbol, and I kind of assume that it means you do 1 damage, but it's never addressed in the rule book that I can see, at least. We did look for it, but the assumption is that it just means damage. In terms of the sanctuaries themselves, some of the abilities are really good. Some of them are kind of useless. I mean, they're not really entirely useless, but some of them they don't seem to match up with their deck as well as other ones do. The deck that I really like to play, which all centers around exhaustion, their pieces are, all their sanctuary abilities are pretty decent in terms of what they're going for with the deck, but there are other ones that don't really line up as well. In terms of some positives, I do like the variety of the cards. I like how the cards play off of each other, and I like the artwork on the cards. It's table friendly. You can play it on a relatively small table. I mean, you do have to have a grid that is essentially 5x4. I guess it would be 5x5 because you have your champion off to one side. Then you have the sanctuaries. Then you have the 4x4 grid that you're playing on, then the same on the other side. So it's a 5x5 grid. So as long as you can do a 5x5 grid of cards, which you should be able to fit on most tables, like any small poker table would fit it. It's pretty good. It's easy to teach once you know the rules. The initial pass through the rules seems kind of intimidating, mostly because the rule book is so thick and small and kind of clunky, and the rules are kind of clunkily written. But once you know how to play it and you can explain it to somebody else, it's pretty easy. It's budget friendly, it's not particularly expensive, and it's easy to set up and clean up and put away, which is always something that I like in my games, because you only have to take out the parts that you need, which is great. There's certain games that when you spend 45 minutes setting them up and then you play for 45 minutes and you spend another half hour breaking it down, that just makes you not want to pull out that game. But this kind of a game, you pull out the decks that you need, you pull out the tokens and stuff that you need, you pull out your little crystals, and that's really it. I like the fact that it has crystals and it's not just like a tracker. That's kind of cool. I think that's something that should be in more of these kind of games, where it's actually like an actual thing that you're using to pay for your summonings, which I think is pretty cool. And that's pretty much my thoughts on the game. I'd definitely would recommend going out and grabbing it. The Kickstarter edition's already passed, but some places I know do still sell the Kickstarter edition. If you could get it, shoot for it, because it's a nice box. It has some extras, extra play modes, and the play mats are really cool. They have nice artwork on them. I really like the box. The box looks awesome with the flap off the top with the artwork. And I'd recommend you picking up a copy. It's a pretty good game, and for the price, it's not particularly expensive. So if you like these reviews and these Kickstarter reviews in specific, hit that like button so you let us know that you like it, and we just keep doing them. Leave a comment down below. Have you backed anything on Kickstarter recently? Did you pick up this game? What are your thoughts on it? Do you have any other games that are in a similar vein that you like to play that are like these deck versus deck kind of games? Anything like that? Subscribe to the channel so you catch more of these going forward. Hit that notification bell so you know what's up, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Hey, are you listening? Hey, this is Billy West. I knew you'd recognize my voice, but sometimes you can't, because you're watching King's Entertainment Reviews. Now, I would love it, being the professor, if you'd comment, like, and subscribe. You hear that? He knows what he's talking about, because he's a smart old bastard. Yeah. All right, now, get with it.